Modern Russian Poetry, an Anthology. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Kevin Davidson. Modern Russian Poetry, an Anthology, selected and translated by Babette Deutsch and Avram Yarmolinsky. Introduction. Modern Russian literature took its rise in the early 19th century. This was more or less the Russian counterpart of the Elizabethan age. Energizing liberal influences were in the air, men's pulses were stirred by the Napoleonic drama, a national self-consciousness came into being, the winds of a new world were blowing from widened horizons. And there was the same coincidence of favorable environment with the accident of genius. Yet if the English Renaissance found its expression in drama, it is notable that nascent Russian literature blossomed in lyricism. England had her Shakespeare, and Russia had her Pushkin, with a difference. He is placed in the company of Dante, Shakespeare, and Goethe by his compatriots, yet even they admit that he lacks the universal significance of his elder peers. He remains, however, the national poet, acknowledged as the first and perhaps the greatest literary artist of his country, a figure upon whom more admiration and scholarship have been lavished than upon anyone else. Had he been accessible to the outside world, its current conceptions of the mood and manner of Russian literature would be different. The Byronism with which he began early gave place to a reconciliation with reality and to a classic sobriety, which made Merimee declare him an Athenian captive among the Scythians. The intensity of his passionate nature was governed by a sense of measure and harmony. His poetry has that quality of normalcy and health which render it educative and to the foreigner uninteresting. The latter may agree with Flaubert that the Russian master is flat, and to suspect that his is the unexciting art whose motto is propria communia dicere. Pushkin was surrounded by a pleiad of lyricists, whose work was of a minor order, but yet was distinguished by a measure of originality. Of these, the somber Baratynsky is now perhaps best remembered. In a sense, Tyuchev too belonged to this group. A contemporary of Pushkin, he was under his influence. Yet he survived the master by many years, and the more significant part of his unique contribution to Russian poetry was written much later. Of all the classicists, Tyuchev is most likely to find a way to the understanding and sympathy of the outside world. His is a deep and authentic voice. Through his poetry blows the wind of his thought, as a breeze bellies a sail to a certain shape. It is a pantheistic philosophy, instinct with the profound cosmic sympathies of a Chinese sage on his lonely mountain. His universe was the battleground of light and darkness. Both were native to him. He did not dismiss the ancient chaos with a facile gesture of tender-minded idealism, but rather saw in it the dark face of God. The mantle of Pushkin fell, not upon Tyuchev, who wrote for posterity, but rather upon Lermontov. He was an egocentric creature with a romantic nostalgia for the supersensuous. His lyricism is informed with a graceful demonism and a proud pessimism which naturally endear him to a youthful audience. Lermontov revolted not against the Tsar of all the Russians, but against the God of heaven and earth. Yet the growing civic bias made it possible to put a social interpretation upon the disquietude which pervades his work. Thus, the forensic Nekrasov, who in the next generation voiced the civic conscience of an epoch of reform, is considered to have issued from Lermontov. Nekrasov's troubled and uneven verse dwelt with the miseries of the peasant and the proletarian. It celebrated the cause of the masses, and made itself the vehicle for the
Sample complete. Ready to continue?